Finally, it's official, and on April 28th, Valve is about to change a lot of how the video game landscape is today, because they are officially releasing Source 2 for anybody to make video games on. Something sorely needed given the current options of video game engines and a lot of the problems surrounding those engines that we've seen over the years. The highly sought after and until now very carefully kept Source 2 engine is about to hit the video game scene like a tall glass of water. But it's not that simple. It never is it? Firstly, because it's not coming from Valve themselves. It's coming from very long-standing partners of Valve, Facepunch. There's a pretty smart reason why Valve isn't actually releasing it themselves and instead doing it through a second party, if you will. And that does come with some caveats. There are some issues here regarding the actual release of it through the application known as S&box, developed by Facepunch, the people behind Rust, and of course, Gary's Mod. However, the most important part of everything, before we get into all the details of why this is important, how this is going to affect you and the video games that you end up playing or even making, the issues that it could bring, and of course, why video game engines matter to begin with, there is one bombshell here that matters. Source 2 is going to be available for people to use to publish their own games on Steam completely royalty-free. Zero royalties on the engine itself, and you get to make your game, export it, and put it on Steam as its own standalone product. And that's a very big deal because what S&box itself is kind of like a paid-for competitor for Roblox. It's not looking great, but I might be getting ahead of myself. Which, by the way, hi, I'm Muggin. If you're new here, welcome, and if you're not new here, welcome back. You're looking fantastic. It's great that you're looking that good, because if I look sick or sound sick, it's because I am sick, but I've been like this for 4 days. At some point, they say somewhere the show must go on, and I'm doing that right now. You know how it all works here on YouTube. If you like the video helps it spread throughout the algorithm. I think this is great and very interesting news to share. And if you really like what I do, how I cover news, reviews, previews, everything in the world of gaming, consider subscribing. Only do so if you are 100% sure that what I do is worth your time. So give it a think, maybe watch something else on the channel, then do so. With that intro out of the way, we're first going to talk about why a new video game engine is so important. Then we're going to talk about S&box, the app that this is actually part of and how that works. And at the end of it all, why it's such a smart decision for Valve to do this and how it can be a game changer for the industry. Timestamps for everything down below. Let's get into it. So video game engines, they're kind of a big deal. You would normally think that us, the customers, don't talk too much about video game engines because that's the behind the scenes stuff that developers use to make the games we play. But the truth is that they've gained a lot of importance in the overall conversation. Specifically, two of them being very well known for having a specific feel or vibe to them. Those being, of course, Unreal Engine 5 and Unity. Unreal Engine 5 has been much maligned and criticized for a lot of its different features and its technology, while becoming the standard of the industry. In a metaphorical way that still will only land for some people, it feels like Unreal Engine 5 is the Adobe of video game development. It's quietly become an industry standard, undoubtedly a powerhouse, but also a resource hog with some critical failures that they have not ironed out. And most notably from the customer side, the Unreal Engine 5 slop feel has been very criticized, especially stuff like shader compilation stutter. Unity, meanwhile, under their former CEO John Riccitiello, decided to implode, destroy their own business model, and just generally tarnish the entire reputation of it all, to the point that a lot of people started moving over to the open source Godot. But those are generally understood as more indie-level engines that are used for smaller scale projects and are rarely used by the big industry titans, which is of course a lot of what people say, but definitely not the truth of any of it. Plenty of indies use Unreal Engine, and plenty of bigger studios use Unity or Godot. More important than that, and probably very notable, is the long list of video game engines that aren't those, and the clear shift from them. Be it Capcom's Reach for the Moon or RE engine that they use for all of their games, Ubisoft's Anvil engine, EA's Frostbite engine, or some other interesting outliers like, for example, Guerrilla's Decima engine used for the Horizon and Death Stranding games. There have been and continue to be plenty of interesting engines out there, be they in-house or just rarely used, and you can achieve many different goals with many different engines. I like to cite that Helldivers 2 uses Autodesk Stingray, a discontinued piece of tech for what is fundamentally a 3D architecture program, and I would assume Eldritch Magic to make Helldivers 2. But at the same time, what has become clear is that everybody kind of wants to move to engines that are supported by other people instead of having to maintain them internally. And despite the fact that a lot of customers push back on this, saying that a lot of that makes the games feel samey and look samey and just aren't as enjoyable as games that are built on their own proprietary engines, even CD Projekt Red has moved from their Red engine for Cyberpunk 2077 to Unreal Engine 5. And that is precisely where Source 2 comes in. Valve's in-house engine, Source 2, sneakily powers some of the most popular games on the planet. Funnily enough, on any given day, 4 of the top 10 most played games on Steam use the Source engine, particularly Counter-Strike 2, Dota 2, and Deadlock, all using Source 2, and Apex Legends using Source 1. In case you didn't know, it's a funny story, but Apex Legends and Titanfall use a heavily modified version of Source called the Titan branch. Kind of similar to how Call of Duty uses the Quake engine, just it's been so modified over time that it's whatever the Call of Duty engine is now. In other words, Source 2 is something that you've probably played at this point, and you kind of get a feel for it and what it's capable of. Some of the standouts of Source 2 being the physically based rendering that it uses, as well as the overall design for scalability and performance, which, you know, is a promise. We'll get into more of that in a bit. And definitely number one and chief among them, and not a surprise if you've been following Valve at all, is Rubicon, its own proprietary physics engine. It's the one that leads to the crazy cool stuff like the bottles and Half-Life Alyx and all of that. And the specific physics interactions of Source and how gravity and weight feel in it is one of the most important parts of it. It's what allows games like Apex Legends to have that feel to its movement that it has. It's what allows Counter-Strike 2 to feel like Counter-Strike 2, and it, of course, is the reason that Deadlock can feel like Deadlock. And despite Source 2 being now over 10 years old, it was designed from the start with consistent updates and a look towards the future. And in the end, here we are. Source 2 finally being available to the public, being a new major player in the space, not just in the gigantic games that Valve puts out and dominates their own storefront, but potentially anywhere. Now, the tech and the potential of the Source 2 engine is something that many people have been dreaming about for years, and people who specifically enjoy both the original Source and the Source 2 engines have been itching for more games that use it. And finally, we're getting our hands on it, but it's not through Valve themselves releasing the SDK, but through their longtime partners, Facepunch. You see, Source 2 has been kept in a tiny, neat, protected little box where only Valve and very select partners are allowed to use it. But now, that's all gone, and we're entering into a new era where anybody can. Now, to answer a question that somebody already asked in their minds, probably you, Nick. I know you're on the treadmill right now. Yeah. Valve hasn't released the Source SDK because they can't be asked. The reality of it is that the Source 2 engine has been used for very specific projects that Valve wants to make, and until now they have not cared about actually giving those tools to other people, mostly because they built Source 2 to run the games that they wanted to make, and in the back end of it all, they do a bunch of tweaks and weird stuff to make sure that the results that they want come out, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's how the engine should be used, or that it's even optimal. It's just the typical game dev thing of reaching for results and doing whatever necessary to make them happen. So having to clean up a lot of the things that they've put into the Source 2 engine, and then put it out there and promise support for this engine so that other people can use it is just something that's not in their purview. But enter Gary Newman, the man behind Gary's Mod, who then went on to found Facepunch and also put out this tiny little game you might have heard of called Rust. Facepunch has been working for years on a new project called S&box, which is meant to be a spiritual successor to Gary's Mod, but not in the same vein of Gary's Mod and the flavor that a lot of Gmod had by using the Source engine's assets, stuff like the Half-Life 2 NPCs and maps. Instead, S&box wants to be a game engine, an interface through which you use Source 2 to build out games and then play them. And that is exactly what it is. And I've played quite a lot of sandbox games, and give me a second. See, Sandbox as it stands today, and as it will stand at its release on the 28th of April for $20, which I don't agree with, but first let me tell you what it is essentially grown-ups Roblox, except some of the games are just Roblox, but worse. It is an interface through which you go in and you download games and you play them in online lobbies. You can make your own game and upload it, and there are certain systems within it, including, of course, cosmetics that then feed into the overall marketplace. It is a hub for games of all sorts of quality, and it is in a way a direct competitor to Roblox, in the same way that My Riz is a direct competitor to Timothy Chalamet's, especially with an upfront price to access it. But however, the promise of Sandbox isn't that you get to toy around with Source 2 in this Roblox-like environment, and instead, the big news is that Valve has finally reached an agreement and given the okay that people using Sandbox to make their games are allowed to export it. Your own independent executable of the game that you created in Sandbox that you can then put up on Steam for sale. All royalty-free, $0. This means that Sandbox will fill in two very important roles. One, a Roblox that I think nobody asked for, but could potentially, maybe, take off, who knows? And two, a game engine that people are going to use in order to leverage Source 2 to make their own games. But wait, I hear you asking again, Nick, then it's a game made in Sandbox, not Source 2? Well, yes and no. Sandbox is essentially Source 2, it's just a translated version of Source 2 that fixes up a lot of the issues that Valve has internally from fidgeting with it to make certain things work, and with an added layer of usability and accessibility. Basically a translation layer for more people to be able to use it, understand it, and cooperate within it. And this is where a lot of things get pretty complicated. There is a lot of controversy surrounding Sandbox. Not just its now $20 release price that they've announced, especially for something that mimicking Roblox doesn't seem like a smart idea, but also with its microtransactions, incredibly expensive cosmetics that then go up on the Steam Marketplace, and all of the usual criticisms of the Steam Marketplace that accompany that, but also with people already creating games that are designed to farm free drop cosmetics within Sandbox because of stuff like the Creator Fund, which is a very cool idea that Facepunch has to motivate creators to actually make excellent games instead of slop, so that they can receive money for actually making Sandbox games. It's a relatively complicated thing and probably worth its own deep dive, especially once the game goes live, and undoubtedly, I'm calling it now, that controversy comes to a head. But the part that I'm really focusing on for this video isn't the Sandbox games themselves, but instead the potential for those games to exist outside of Sandbox, with the first one of them all being My Summer Cottage, which is probably exactly what you imagine, something along the lines of My Summer Car, but Finnish, unless that one was Finnish and this one's Swedish, something like that. And while Sandbox has been free to access for a lot of people, and you can technically access it right now, and maybe you're still in time that you will get the game for free if you log on enough hours before it goes live on the 28th of April. Once it just hits the Steam store and more people start logging on, playing games, and then starting to go, hey, I can use this to make my game, or maybe there's a better future in this. And especially as updates continue to roll out over time, there is a potential for something amazing here that could pop up as Sandbox games that people play, playtest, try out, give feedback, and end up blowing up and becoming their own games that then go out onto the Steam Marketplace as their own individual game. It's just overall a very exciting thing within game development because it opens up the doors for veterans to move away and try something else, try something new, for indie devs to have an alternative that is royalty-free to develop their own games, and even potentially for an entirely new generation to grow up with some interesting tools. Not to mention that there, I guess, is a potential for a Roblox to Sandbox pipeline, especially if there are talented Roblox developers out there making their games, which we know there are, that then move them over to S&box, expand on them just so that they can release them on Steam, but going through potentially a more comfortable, more familiar structure in that process. The easiest way to look at all of this is that there is now a new major game engine that people can use to make their games, and it is completely free. I mean, I guess, except those $20, those $20 at the start. But after that, no royalties, no nothing. Just develop your games and then put them out wherever you want. Will this lead to a flood of slop on Steam? Potentially, but that's already there. So instead, I'd like to remain hopeful and think that what it's really going to do is give tons of people new tools to create cool video games that they couldn't before, or that certain limitations didn't allow them to, or with a game engine that gels with them more, that allows them to express themselves and reach the end targets that they want better than some of the tools that we see with Unity, Godot, or Unreal Engine. At the end of the day, it is competition, and competition is what breeds excellence. You might also be wondering why all of this is happening for free. And while there are many criticisms that people have towards Gary Newman, this is not one of them. Gary has been very outspoken in saying that the reason for S&box being very cheap and not looking for royalties and just letting people make games and put them out on their own accord and on different storefronts, when he was young, Valve gave him the opportunity with Gary's mod. The giant hand of Gabe Newell descended from the heavens and reached out to Gary Newman and said, "You will now be a multimillionaire. Here is a career." And he has been blessed with Facepunch Studios and with this relationship with Valve, both through the amount of money that Facepunch has made with Gary's mod and, of course, with Rust. Now, he doesn't care, and as he himself says, he's made way more money than he ever thought he could, and probably more money than he could ever spend. What he wants is to pass it forward and give more people more opportunities to live the dream life that he got to live. And that's exactly what S&box intends to be. And that is a really strange thing to see in the incredibly cynical, money-hungry, greedy world of video games that we kind of live in at the moment. And it really just feels like a natural extension of Valve's philosophy on a lot of things. Despite them making a lot of money, they do respect their customers more than most other companies. And in this case, I feel like Facepunch approached them with something that they were happy with, that they could go, okay, we don't want the responsibilities associated with giving people access to Source 2. So if you're going to take on those responsibilities, knock yourself out. And now we, the customers, get to reap the benefits. I want you to keep a very close eye on S&box and what could be upcoming. If you're new to the channel, you might not know this, but like, I champion indie games greatly. I love indie games because it's where I find some of the coolest experiences in the gaming medium. So I am incredibly excited for what is to come from this. And in the next couple of days, there'll be a video up on this channel that's a bit different from the usual. It's a bit more of an edited Let's Play format with a little bit of commentary from me, checking out, I believe, 30 different S&box games that I've already played and it's already done to really show a bit of the breadth of what the engine is capable of, what actually works, what doesn't, and what are some of the good and bad ideas that are out there, what sort of talent there's already on the storefront creating stuff with Source 2. So if you would like, you can check that out. I think it's a fun video. It's a bit less intense and like information dense than most of my videos, but hopefully it's also entertaining. And if you're not subscribed, it's a great time to do so you don't miss that one. There is, of course, more to come. So keep that in mind. And in the meantime, I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching and for sticking to the end. And an extra special thanks to the members of The Wall. Be they members on Patreon or directly here on YouTube. These are the people who directly support what I do here day in and day out. Algorithm be damned, and I am incredibly grateful for that. Thank you for sticking through it all, and including my hopefully not too terribly sick voice. I've been Mug, and I'll see you again very soon.